Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to do something a little different. We're not just going to talk about communication. We're going to break down the art of strategic empathy and hopefully turn you from just a talker into a true master of influence.
Let's just start with a hard truth, one that kind of frames this whole conversation. It's from Stephen Covey. And the reality is, most of our conversations, they're not really about connection, are they? They're about waiting for our turn to speak, just reloading our own arguments, waiting for them to take a breath so we can jump in.
And this turns what should be a dialogue into what the source material brilliantly calls combat talking. It's a verbal battle where nobody's actually listening. But our goal today, it's to pull you right off that battlefield and put you in a place of strategic control, where you can win arguments before they even really get started. So, here is our game plan. We'll start by really nailing down the core problem. Then, I'll introduce you to something called the Iceberg Tactic, followed by some seriously powerful silent influence techniques. We'll see it all work in a roleplay, and then we'll wrap up with your very first mission. Okay, let's dive right into this communication deathmatch. The reason you feel like you're not being heard is because most of the time we're just so focused on broadcasting our own message that we just create noise. We're talking past each other and nothing gets done. So the objective, the real goal here, is to completely flip that switch. We have to stop being a radio transmitter, just blasting our signal out into the world, and start being a psychological strategist. It's about winning the game by understanding the other player, maybe even better than they understand themselves. And that leads us to the absolute core of this whole strategy, the Iceberg Tactic. You've heard the analogy, right? What you see on the surface, it's just a tiny fraction of what's really going on underneath. And that's exactly how conversations work.
See, to get any real influence, you have to learn to analyze your audience through these 3 hidden layers. First, what do they actually know? Second, what are they feeling in that moment? And third, maybe most important, what do they really, truly want? This is where the real game is played.
So let's start at the top layer, knowledge. And right away, we hit a huge trap that so many people fall into, the Arrogance Trap. You start using complex jargon with someone who isn't an expert. It doesn't make you look smart. It just makes them feel dumb. And when people feel dumb, they get defensive, they shut down. The fix? It's actually super simple and incredibly powerful. Metaphors. So instead of saying something like, network bandwidth is congested, which might mean nothing to your boss, you say, look, it's like we have this tiny little water pipe and we're trying to force a river through it. Boom. Instantly they get it.
Okay, now we go a little deeper, below the surface. And this is where we find layer 2, emotion. Honestly, this is where most arguments are won or lost before a single logical point is even made. And the number one emotion you're going to face? Resistance. You know the look? Crossed arms, defensive posture, that skeptical face.
And here's the thing that's totally counterintuitive. You don't fight resistance with more logic. That's like pushing harder on a locked door. No, you do something much smarter. You name their fear for them. You say something like, I get the sense you might be worried about how this impacts the budget. The moment you do that, it's like a key in the lock. It disarms them, and it makes them listen. All right, now we get to the very bottom of the iceberg, the deepest, most powerful level, motivation. This is all about choosing the right bait for the right person. Trying to convince a data-driven analyst with an inspiring story? It's useless. They want charts and numbers. And for someone who craves control, don't tell them what to do. Give them options. Let them choose. So we understand the iceberg now, right? But knowing what's there isn't enough. We need to be able to influence it. And that is where our next section comes in, the weapons of silent influence. These are the tools for mastering the unspoken conversation. Okay, first tool in the toolbox, mirroring. This is, well, it's almost like a superpower, and it's totally subconscious. It's the simple act of subtly matching someone's posture or their tone. If they lean in, after a moment, you lean in a little. This creates this unspoken sense of, hey, this person is like me, and we are hardwired to trust people who are like us. Next up, you have to become a detective of the body. You're looking for what we call non-verbal leakage. Because here's the thing, people can lie with their words, but their bodies, their hands, their feet, they almost always tell the truth. Someone might be saying yes, but if their foot is tapping and pointed at the door, their body is screaming no. And this brings me to a brilliant, super tactical hack you can use tomorrow. Let's call it the water glass hack. You see someone with their arms crossed, that classic wall of resistance. Don't call them out on it.
Instead, just hand them something, a glass of water, a pen, a report. To take it, they physically have to uncross their arms, and very often an open body leads to a more open mind. All right, theory is one thing, but let's put it into practice. Let's see how all these different pieces, the iceberg, the mirroring, the hacks, come together in a real-world, high-stakes situation that I think a lot of us can relate to. I want you to really imagine this. You've just poured your heart out, making your case for a raise you know you deserve. And what you get back is nothing. Just silence. Your boss is leaning back in their chair, arms folded tightly across their chest. The room feels ice cold. What do you do? Well, the amateur makes one of two classic mistakes. They either make it all about themselves, but I worked so hard, I deserve it, which just sounds whiny. Or they ask this really weak, passive question, like, so what do you think? Which just invites a simple, dismissive no. But the master? Oh, the master plays a completely different game. It's a three-step move. Watch this. First, they read the nonverbal cue, those crossed arms, and they name the fear out loud. Then, they shut up and listen. And when the boss says, yeah, the budget's tight, they mirror that keyword back. Tight. Finally, they reframe the entire conversation, turning it from a cost into a win-win. That is strategic empathy in action. See the difference? That's the playbook in action. So now, it's your turn. Let's talk about how you can start putting these skills into practice right away. Let's talk about your first mission. Okay, let's recap the toolkit. These are your key takeaways, your new playbook. First, always analyze the 3 layers of the iceberg. Second, when you feel resistance, name the emotion to disarm it. Third, use mirroring to build that subconscious connection. And finally, always be reading the nonverbal leakage to find out what's really going on. So here it is. Your mission, should you choose to accept it, is called the 3-Minute Detective Challenge. It's simple. In your very next conversation with anyone, for the first 3 minutes, you are not allowed to talk about yourself at all. Your only job is to ask questions and observe. Watch their hands. Try a little mirroring. Just shift your entire focus from broadcasting to receiving. Look, this isn't just some interesting theory. It's a practical skill. It's a tool you can start sharpening today in your very next interaction, and it will fundamentally change the way you communicate. So, the only question left is, who's it going to be? Who will be your first subject?